is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering King of Scars. Chapters 23, 24, and 25. Isaak, Nina, and Zoya. In these chapters, Isaak has to rescue a girl from drowning, allegedly. Isaak, baby, I knew that wasn't what was happening. How did that not occur to you? And we have a whole history with Zoya that we get to see, and it is heart-wrenching and kind of badass. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Joanna for commissioning this episode. So these chapters were really fun. I feel like a little creepy saying that they were fun when Zoya's chapter was so painful in so many ways. But like, it's still fun to see a girl not get sold off to an old pedophile. So that's cool. But first, we are going to talk about Isaak's chapter. Isaak, who is still a bit of a sweet summer child, and he is being instructed by Tamar and Genya about speaking to the shoe princess and getting some information out of her by being charming, disarming, whatever. And later on, when they actually have a conversation, he doesn't actually manage to really get much information out of her in that respect. But I feel like he earns her trust in a way that isn't going to hurt him later on. I feel like this girl does not seem stupid. So I think that if you were to dive in trying to get information, she'd sense what was going on. And doing it this way is going to benefit him more in the end. But yeah, this whole bit between Tamar and Tolia about how to handle her, it's so great. I love this so much. Tolia says to him about how to handle her if, Nikolai doesn't have a natural, as he puts it, charisma and gift for witty conversation. Tolia says, compliment her. Express your admiration for shoe culture. You might consider reciting. And Tamar has to, interrupt him and says, oh my God, no, none of that. Just listen to her. Ask her questions. Women don't want to be seduced. They want to be seen and listened to. You can't do either of those things if you're thinking up strategies on how to win her over or reciting the fourth epic of Craigie. Guys, is this the truest fucking thing? This is something that I wish that more dudes were exposed to, this concept, because whenever in media we see a guy who is managing to be like a real lady killer and win over women very easily, they are always portrayed as somebody who is a shyster and ladles on compliments really thickly to probably women who don't necessarily deserve those compliments, but it still works, and that's kind of all it takes. And while I don't deny that there are women who are going to be swayed by that kind of thing, mostly women are sick of hearing it because dudes do nothing but try to compliment us. And then, of course, if we turn them down, immediately call us a fat bitch and say that they would never want to fuck us anyway. So compliments are really kind of meaningless to a lot of women out there. I feel like the only people who would respond to them well might be somebody who is feeling bad about themselves at the moment. But if there's somebody who is like either very beautiful, she's going to be so tired of hearing it. And if it's a woman who is not very beautiful, I think a lot of women who do not feel that they are conventionally attractive, when a guy comes too hard with compliments, their antenna go up and they get suspicious because they know, okay, buddy, look, I look fine. No. And just generally not focusing on how a woman looks is a great way to actually acknowledge that you see her as a human being. So, and the listening and asking her questions is so key. Dude, I am in a group with a lot of single women who are dating online, and they will share screenshots of text conversations they have where they have asked a dude 15 questions about their lives, their interests, their hobbies, their family, and not one time has the guy responded with a question of his own about her life, her interests, her hobbies, her family. It hasn't even occurred to him to ask. And look, I can be very self-absorbed. I know that it can be like, it hasn't occurred to me to return the favor because I'm so excited to tell you the story about something that happened to me. I know that vibe. But when you're dating and you're trying to get to know a person, I can't fathom not wanting to ask this stuff, not being curious about the person you're talking to. And what it comes down to is that many men aren't curious about the women they're talking to. They want to get laid, or they want a mommy/housekeeper. And seeing women as people is not really the top of their list of priorities. So personally, I am just delighted with this little bit. And I am so glad that Isaak actually listens to the advice. I wasn't sure how receptive he would be or how much he would remember even her instructions here, but he uses this information later and it does seem to good effect. So anyway, he gets these instructions and then he is taken out onto the lake. And they are, let's see, the lake was too cold for swimming, but the tide makers had heated its surface so that mist rose from the water in dense clouds, which squallers manipulated into symbols of various countries and families of standing. That's cool. That sounds rad. And I love this so much. There is this moment where Genya is talking to a Fjerdan ambassador. And he asks if they might have a tour of the Grisha school. "Of course you may," said Genya. "It would be our great pleasure." Isaak did not think he imagined the current of excitement that passed between the ambassador and another member of his delegation. Genya smoothed her skirts and added, "But I fear you may find it boring. The students are currently traveling with their teachers as part of their instruction." "All of them?" "Yes," said Genya. "We find work in the field is so beneficial for a child's education, and I must say I'm not sorry for the peace and quiet. Young Grisha can be quite high-spirited, as I'm sure you can imagine. We didn't want them getting underfoot with such important new friends visiting." And the Fjerdans are aware that they have been moved purposely to keep them away from the Fjerdans. And when they say, "Oh, so you evacuated them," Genya giggles and says, "That would imply there was some kind of threat to a group of children who could set fire to this barge and stop the hearts of everyone on it with a sweep of a hand. It is too droll." I love this so much. Look, I am aware that you have to play these games. I mean, you see this in all kinds of media when you are trying to give like a sort of barbed, pointed comment, but you have to be passive aggressive about it. But Genya is like so almost aggressive instead of passive aggressive that I got to admit, she just speaks to my heart sometimes. I really do enjoy her. Zoya, I feel like I relate to more in a lot of ways. But Genya is somebody that I would definitely want to be friends with and I would deeply admire. So, yeah, then there is a conversation with her and Isaak, and he's like, so you definitely sent them away on purpose. And she's like, yeah, they're going to try and like target Grisha students for an attack to take out a bunch of basically our army and our people and a new generation of Grisha. She says, a fearful Fjerdan is one less likely to act, and I just relish the idea of them having bad dreams about a bunch of school children. And at this point, Isaak expresses some admiration for how good she is at all of this and the fact that she really knows how to navigate. And she is like, I know how to navigate because I have trauma, basically, is what it is. I know how to navigate because I got thrown into the deep end, and the Darkling could never have given fewer shits about how I was doing. He utilized me as a tool and didn't see me in any further capacity. And I had to figure out ways to stay alive and take care of myself. And, you know, we know all of this because we were in the book with Alina and seeing how Genya was treated, and we heard about the evolution of how she served with the queen and she was a favorite for a while, but gradually queen began to hate her because she knew that Genya was his mistress. And Isaak is like, so wait, you were a traitor? You were spying on them? And she's like, duh, babe. Yes. And Nikolai knows, and he pardoned me. And this moment is interesting. He calls the Darkling cruel for doing that to her. And she's like, well, I mean, he was cruel. But when you use the word cruel, it sort of implies that somebody is intentionally inflicting harm. And in the case of me and the way the king was preying on me, that wasn't cruelty. That was simply like basically neglect and indifference. It literally never even occurred to him to be concerned about what I was going through. He just genuinely put me in a position to get him information, and beyond that, never gave it a second thought. I wasn't a person, and he didn't care. And this gets interrupted by one of the girls going overboard. One of the merchant's daughters had fallen into the water and was sinking fast. And Genya tells him to jump in and save her. And Isaak is like, dude, I can't swim. And she's like, what the fuck? Why didn't you tell me that? And he's like, nobody ever asked me about that, and I didn't think it was going to be a problem. So she tells him, jump and don't you dare flail. Sink as fast as you can and we'll do the rest. And basically what they do is they get a squaller to like jump in and pull him into such a direction that they are able to make it look as if he saved this girl, even though he just was basically like a sack of potatoes limply being dragged along. And he has this whole moment at the end where, you know, he's worried that she's dead. First of all, of course she's not dead. Then he has this like very heroic moment of carrying her on the shore and being like, she's going to be okay. And they congratulate him later for that foresight because it makes a really good picture. But it is really funny to me that it never occurred to him once that she had done this on purpose, when that was the literal first thing I thought. Like, it doesn't sound like these are boats that it would be easy to fall off of. They're not on the ocean with choppy weather. They're on a lake that's like still as glass practically. How is she going to fall off? Of course, this was planned. And he, like, Isaak later is like, genuinely, why would they do that? And I'm like, dude, because they're trying to make themselves memorable to you. They're trying to put themselves in a position where you have to like come check on them later, so that it forces conversation and a sort of like bond between the two of you. You have to do anything you can if you are in one of these women's position to make yourself stand out and develop a connection that the other women aren't or can't. So this feels like completely fair play to me. Very predictable. So let's see. The crowd burst into applause. Isaak set down Birgitta before his arms gave out, depositing her on the sand like a pile of wet laundry. He bowed and managed to stop his teeth chattering long enough to kiss her hand. He'd graduated from minor breaches of etiquette to nearly getting himself and someone else drowned. Perhaps tomorrow he'd manage to burn down the palace. Buddy, you were neither of you in any danger of drowning. I know it felt like that, but it's not something to be concerned about. So then he goes back to the palace, gets into a hot bath, gets dressed. And Genya is talking to him about how well he did with, like, overall the presentation that he made. And they are talking about the trigger device that was on the door to release the gas. And they believe pretty confidently that it's Fjerdan. It's not something that they can prove, but that's what they are fairly certain of. And Tamar says, in a way, this is good news. We already suspected the Fjerdans didn't come to play. If it had been the Kirch or Shu, we would have had real cause to worry. This means the Shu are still open to an alliance. We were curious to see who might attempt the king's life. And when Isaak says something about, like, being concerned about dying, Tolia tries to be like, we would never let anything happen to you. And I'm like, I'm sure you really wouldn't want to, because you need this guy. Like, he is just absolutely fucking clutch for you all right now. That does not mean, though, that he isn't seen as more disposable than Nikolai would be. You know, I mean, it's like, if they find out that Nikolai is okay and he comes back, especially, I am worried about what that will be like for him. These people are all decent people, so I like to think that they wouldn't be dicks about it, you know? But, yeah, I do wonder. So, let's see. Tamar talks about going and searching the guards' chambers, the Shu guards, and everybody is sort of, like, not super cool about that. They feel like that's a risk, making them angry. But Tamar didn't find anything anyway, so it doesn't wind up mattering. And the Kirch made an attempt on our labs. We let them make it all the way to the fabricator workshops. And it turns out, like, that's not where any of the real work gets done. They even planted fake blueprints and everything. Like, they are completely aware that these other countries are going to try and find out what they can while they're here, and they are prepared to lead them in the wrong direction. So let's see. At this point, Tamar says, all of it should help set the stage for our performance at the Gilded Bog. We're going to the Gilded Bog? Asked Isaak, unable to hide his excitement. Unfortunately, said Tolia. Genya tucked her slippered feet beneath her. We'll be using Count Kirigin's lake to show the Kirch our prototype of the Ismarsia. A look passed between the others that Isaak didn't understand, but that was nothing new. He assumed someone would tell him what exactly an Ismarsia was, so he could nod sagely about the subject when the time came. You will be working, added Tamar, not sampling Kirigin's entertainments. So the Gilded Bog, I had forgotten about this place. I think it's Kirigin. I think I'm saying that right. But this is the craft that they made, like, a fake that malfunctions purposefully, right? This is part of the, like, plan that got set into place earlier in the book. Sorry, guys. I know that it might feel to you like, yeah, you just read that. I didn't just read that. That was half a year ago at this point. Like, it is so hard sometimes with how spaced out some of these can be. Not just this, but, you know, everything I'm covering, to keep in mind details and names. Like, when they said Gilded Bog, I had no idea what they were talking about until they mentioned Kirigin's name, because the name is more memorable to me somehow. Genya mentions to him that they're going to go hunting, and eventually everybody leaves, and Isaak is sitting there feeling restless and weird, and he decides to go into the conservatory, which is his favorite place. As somebody who went to school at a really busy college, but a college that had a huge glass-stained conservatory, that was where I went. Once I found it, that was where I went all the time to try and calm my nerves because I was so stressed in school. It was one of the only places I could go and feel like I could take a deep breath. So I relate to this. And there is this girl, the shoe princess, and she is seated next to one of the pawns. So she lifts her head, she rose hurriedly and curtsied. "Your Highness, I didn't mean to intrude on your peace," he said in Shu. "I am a guest here. There can be no intrusion." And she asks if he would like to sit and talk a while. And he thinks to himself, "Oh, nice. I didn't even have to ask." And I'm like, of course you didn't have to ask. She wants to talk to you, dude. Like, he's just so clueless about the way that these women are looking at the situation. He sees them all as like potentially just kind of shuttlecocks that are being blown around by the wind in whatever direction, rather than having been trained to cope with situations exactly like this one. And it's just kind of precious. He doesn't understand how mercenary women have been trained to be in like any universe where a woman doesn't get to like work and make her own life on her own and depends on a husband. Figuring out how to handle courtships like this was a full-time job. That's your whole life, you know? So let's see. He asks why she asked him to join her if she wanted to be alone. "I must be seen to be making an effort, or the guards will report back to my sister, and then I will never hear the end of it." And she says, our celestial princess will inherit the crown and rule wisely and justly for many years. And he asks, "What will you do?" She says, "Marry you, of course." "Of course," Isaak said, willing himself not to squirm. "But if you were not to marry me?" At this, she looked almost panicked, as if the question was not one that had been scripted for her, and she wasn't at all sure how honest she should be. And this is an interesting moment because I think that probably he's correct about it just not being a scripted question. But also, I can't help but wonder how much of that is just panic at the idea that what if I don't land this guy? Because I'm certain that there's something going on with the shoe where he is kind of crucial, and it's been impressed upon her how much she needs to like work for this. And she basically is like, "I would be a member of the Royal Guard," and he can't help but laugh because he's a member of the Royal Guard and she doesn't realize that. And she takes the laugh kind of the wrong way. And he's like, "I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at you. I was just very surprised. I can understand why you'd find that appealing, though, because it does lend some freedom, but you would still have duties." And she says, "Yes, but I wouldn't be forced to pose and preen just to be sold off like chattel." And then all of a sudden goes really pale because she realizes that she just said that shit out loud. And when he says, "I don't expect every woman I meet to be eager to wed me," she is genuinely like, "You don't?" And he has to sort of save it by being like, "Not at first." And when he says not at first, she looks disappointed. And I have to think that she was sort of hoping that he was going to see her personhood for a moment, but instead he seems to be only flirting, you know? So this is when he mentions that a girl almost drowned, and she's like, "Oh my God, she really didn't." And she's like, "I was suggested to do the same thing, and I wasn't willing to do it." And he says, "Well, not when you could simply wait for a pensive king to amble by and find you looking like a painting in green silk with flowers in your hair." Her golden eyes shifted away guiltily. "How long were you waiting, hoping I might stroll by?" 2 hours and 12 minutes, give or take. And he's just like, wow, that must be very uncomfortable. And she's like, yeah, my ass is asleep, basically, which was pretty funny. So this is when they talk about the guard and how they are, like, it's an honor to be selected. They aren't drawn from nobility exclusively. And they don't, they do leave their families behind. They're happy to do so, though. I think it's hardest for the twins. They're very common among our people. And there's this bit where she recites some poetry and he knows the, like, next verse to it. I've found that this position, this life of display, can make the savor, can take the savor from many things I once enjoyed. Because he asked her if she played a certain musical instrument, and she says yes, but she does so with a sort of tension. And I love this. He can tell the reason why she tenses up here. And this is so true about everything. If you take something that you love and you make it an obligation in any way, it will no longer be fun. That's just, it's not necessarily that it will no longer be fun across the board at all, but there is an element of joy that will be stripped away because of the obligation. That is just unavoidable. You can love your job. Like, I love podcasting, but once it got made a job for me, very different. It's just different, you know? I am still able to, like, have fun with it and enjoy myself, but it just has a whole different energy. And Rashawn and I were talking about, like, potentially creating a GoFundMe for her to cover something with me. And she was, like, interested for a few minutes. And then she's, like, mentally put herself in the place where she has to record because she's been paid for it, and felt all of a sudden like the pressure of that, and was like, you know what? I don't think I want to do that. And I understood what she meant. And something like this, where maybe she liked to play this instrument, but it was made into such a thing that she was supposed to, like, put on a performance, you know, I could see that really robbing something of the enjoyment that you used to get from it. So he connects with her here, but then they get interrupted by some other girls who turn up and are feeling a little bit, obviously, jealous of the fact that he's having a one-on-one conversation for an extended period with the shoe princess, and they're trying to edge their way in there. So that's the end of that chapter. Then we go to Nina. And Nina, Leonie, and Adric are talking about their plan. And just overall, the thing that they keep running into is figuring out how to handle these women who are drugged. Because they are going to go into withdrawals. They are going to be absolutely desperate for another fix. And what will they do when they realize that the people who have snuck them out are not actually going to give them any more parem? And Nina is basically, like, of the opinion that they should be sedated. And Leonie is very uncomfortable with that. She's like, first of all, these women are pregnant, which makes me extremely nervous. Second of all, we're not going to get to test these what do you call it? The sedatives out before we use them. So it's going to be really risky as to whether or not they do any harm or not. And thirdly, it's just a matter of consent. They aren't choosing this stuff. And is this the right thing to do for us to pull them out of a situation where a situation they were put in against their consent, to put them into yet another situation without their consent? And Nina, having been addicted, is kind of like, look, you're not wrong about any of the things you're concerned about, but the only other option we've got is to leave them there. And we absolutely can't do that. And having been addicted myself, I know how fucking horrible it was. And I had support. I had people who loved me, who gave me purpose and kept me going. They aren't going to have that. So they're going to have to rely on one another to a point. And they're not going to be able to manage that right away. Sedating them is going to be the only means of keeping them calm enough to detox without potentially like hurting themselves or other people trying to get to another source, or maybe even go back where they came from because they aren't thinking clearly, you know? And the way she puts it, like to sum it up, is just Parem takes away choice. And I was like, that's a really good way to say that. Just the idea of addiction. People just don't understand addiction, I think, is a lot of the thing. And if you haven't been yourself a victim of addiction in one way or another, it's really hard to explain to somebody why you would do something self-destructive when you know it's self-destructive. You know, it's just a difficult place to be. And let's see. She says, what if they don't come back from this? This is Leonie. We could be dooming them to a horrific journey, maybe even death. Nina remembered the agony of her battle with Parem too well. She'd begged for death, prayed for it. Without Matthias, she wasn't sure she could have held on. And that had just been the first struggle. And then she talks about Inej and Kaz and everybody. I won't pretend I'm thinking straight. Seeing those women, those girls that way, I understand what Parem does. I've been through that war. I know what I would choose. And you're willing to make that choice for them? We all have to be willing. And, I mean, essentially, yeah, you have to make this choice for them because, as she says, it takes away the choice to begin with. And also, there's just this sort of like, well, otherwise, what are your options, you know? So, Nina goes to the classroom, and there is a new student, Corey. And Nina tried to look delighted. Another student. Excellent. Do you have any knowledge of Zemini? No, Corey said sulkily. Clearly, she wasn't thrilled to be stuck with this duty, and clearly the well-mother thought Nina and Hannah shouldn't be left alone. So, a spy, basically, and they have to go through this lesson as if it's an actual lesson. And all of a sudden, the well-mother sends a girl to fetch Hannah, and as it turns out, Nina also. And Hannah is just extremely freaked out about the reception that she's going to get from her father. She doesn't know what he's going to do. So they go up to the well-mother's like office, sort of. And the dude turns around, and Nina realizes suddenly that it is Jarl Brum, the fucking monster from the Six of Crows books, who pretended to not recognize her at the like mixer at the ice gate. I can't remember what it's called. But it turns out he absolutely fucking knew who she was, and he traps her and tries to enslave her. And it is one of those things that I was like, I was pretty confident we were going to see him again. Matthias kept her from killing him, and this is the sort of thing where I'm like, I understand your thinking on this, Matthias. And I know that Matthias had some sort of like a personal loyalty to this guy as well, but the dude's a monster and continues to do monstrous shit. And I think he would have been an improvement dead. And I think the world would be improved if he were dead. So I just don't have a lot of patience for the whole pacifism thing lately anymore, you guys. Like, it's just not... there's a certain sort of energy to it that can feel really sanctimonious and privileged in a way that is just like not really grappling with the reality of the situation in a way that feels fair or like it understands, you know? And with Matthias, I mean, like, to a point he can't understand. You know, he hasn't been through anything that she has. He hasn't been through the addiction that she was forced into either. Everything about like what he knows is something that he has only learned about secondhand by being in a relationship with Nina. It's not the same. So I can get why he was gun shy about it, but oh man, dude, I just wish you'd let her kill him, for fuck's sake. And this moment, she is like, first of all, absolutely like so angry. And that is something that she has to quell. However, she's also really afraid because he saw through her disguise once before. Her disguise now is so much better than the last one was. So she's pretty confident he won't see through it. But, you know, she's learning to lean on that a little bit less than she had. And her fear is the thing that she actually decides to tap into for this performance. And this is really interesting. She just decides to be extremely submissive, to pay him compliments about how she has never met a great man before. His lip curled slightly. Why do you tremble so? I have had little cause to be in the presence of great men. Brum's brows rose, but she didn't miss the flash of satisfaction in his eyes. So this was what Commander Brum liked. Flattery, timidity, fear. When she'd met him last, she'd been bold and flirtatious. Now she understood her mistake. And this is one of those things that, like, look, preferring somebody who has a milder personality is no crime. But whenever a dude specifically mentions wanting a woman who is submissive, red flags. Just a giant waving series of red flags. Like, it is just... that'll tell you everything you need to know. And there is a difference between somebody who, like, enjoys submissiveness in sex games versus somebody who just wants a woman who is overall submissive. Those are not the same thing. And you see so many dudes just out there talking about wanting this in a woman with such openness because they don't see it as a red flag. They don't see how that sounds. And I'm just like, how can you not get this? That's so, like, off-putting and gross. And she pulls this off really well, and Brum clearly is sort of into it. But the well mother is like, oh, I fucking see what you're doing after he leaves. And it's like, he's married, by the way. And it is so funny because Nina basically, like, gets back at her with, like, I'm sorry that your mind immediately goes to a filthy, sinful place, but I'll say some prayers for you. I'm not sure that this is a great, wholesome place for Hannah to be. Maybe I'll talk to her dad about it. And I was like, oh, girl, yes. At the same time, Nina is glad that this lady has suspicions about her in a direction that is so not the proper direction to be following, because it will be a great distraction. And Hannah, when they finally are alone together, is just like, what the fuck was that? That wasn't who you are. I didn't know that you could, like, put on a performance like this. Have you been fucking lying to me? And Nina is essentially like, dude, you know who your father is and what he does. I don't care if you're not willing to admit it to yourself. You know. We have to survive. Have you stopped to think about what he'd do if you were found to be Grisha? What would he do? What would everybody else do? You would be an embarrassment. You would jeopardize his position. And also, subtext, he'd probably kill you or enslave you. But that's not said out loud because Hannah still isn't willing to, like, face up to that. I can help my sister. I can help you. And I'll do what I have to in order to make that possible. If that means batting my lashes at your father and convincing him I'm a model of Fjerdan womanhood, I'll do it. It's disgusting. You looked at my father as if he were an incarnation of gel. I looked at your father the way he wants to be looked at, like a hero. And this is when Hannah says, is that what you do with me? Guys, I'm going to say this once again. I'm kind of shipping Nina and Hannah, and I feel like Hannah is anxious to know whether Nina has been fucking around with her, because maybe Hannah is just like kind of growing attached to her in a way. Now, I don't like to assign like a sexual undercurrent to an actually very platonic so far friendship. This is just me personally like kind of going off on a tangent there and wanting that. And it ends with Nina saying that she is glad that she met Hannah. And Hannah's like, yeah, my father wants you to join us for dinner tonight. So, and he says after he tours the factory. When does he return to the capital? Tomorrow morning. You're planning something. Yes, said Nina. You knew I would. I won't act until he's gone, but I'm going to need your help. I want you to become who your father always hoped you'd be. And that's the end of that chapter. So now we go to Zoya. Zoya is, first of all, kind of having a difficult time being bait for Nikolai for his like exercises at calling up this monster. He was getting better at calling up the monster, but his mood seemed to be growing darker. He was quieter and more distant at the end of each visit with Elizaveta, though it was Zoya who had to face drowning. The monster still seemed to believe the threat was real, even though neither of them really thinks Elizaveta is going to hurt her. And yeah, so she's struggling with that. She goes to Elizaveta's, and Nikolai hasn't gotten there yet. Neither has Yuri. And her and Elizaveta have a conversation here about the Darkling. It turns out Elizaveta knew the Darkling, and Zoya is just like, God damn, this bitch is a lot more old than I keep thinking. And she mentions him being drawn to power. He was arrogant, idealistic, beautiful. I met him many times throughout the years, and he adopted many guises to hide his true self, but the faces he chose were always lovely. He was vain. And Zoya says, or smart. People value beauty. They can't help but respond to it. You would know, said Elizaveta. The fairy stories really aren't true, are they? They promise that goodness or kindness will make you lovely, but you are neither good nor kind. Zoya shrugged. Should I aspire to be? And she's like, well, the king values those things. And Zoya's like, yeah, why would I seek his approval? He's given me a job. I don't need his approval to do my job. And when she says something about, like, if he wants to be, simpered over, he'll get a wife. And Elizaveta is like, oh, so you'd give him up. And Zoya's like, give him up. He's not mine. And Elizaveta says, there's a reason I use you and not the monk to provoke his demon. I see the way his eyes follow you. Men have been watching me my whole life. It's not worth taking note of. And this is when, so first we get a little hint of like part of this huge hive that she's essentially standing in smells weird and the bees sound different. And Elizaveta says that part is weary and tired of life. That bitterness will spread to the rest of the hive until all existence will lose its savor. That's why I must leave the fold, why I will take on a mortal life. So this is when we go over to Juris. Zoya, like the whole thing with Nikolai, we don't even see. We just jump to after that's done. And he tells her that she's not going to be fighting with weapons today. And she's annoyed because she's cranky. And she just kind of wants to like take that out on somebody or something. And he's like, I really thought that you'd be further along in your practice by now. And she's like, I'm doing amazingly. What are you talking about? And he's like, you can still only summon wind. You should also be able to summon water and fire. And she's like, well, it doesn't work like that. And he's like, bitch, have you not yet learned that you don't know how it works? Why are you telling me what the limitations are when I've already proven to you more than once that you don't know what the limitations are? Stop talking. Knock it off. And I was like, honestly, that is true. She needs to stop it. Like, this is always something that I am surprised by. And it's not like a surprise with Zoya considering her confidence, but I am somebody who often thinks that I don't know all the details on something. There are certain things that I will feel confident talking about because I really do know, like cooking, you know? And maybe that's the thing here, is that she really is like, of course I fucking know. But if I were in the presence of somebody who had just made something that I didn't even know was possible, I would kind of shut my mouth, even as much as I think I know. And so he tells her, all right, look, you're going to get on my back and we're going to go somewhere. And he turns himself into a dragon and she climbs up there. And at first she's just like, oh, this is amazing. And then all of a sudden she sees this blot on the landscape and she says, turn around. And he tells her, open the door, Zoya of the lost city. The dragon swooped and dove for the ruins of Novosibirsk. And this all of a sudden causes her to like go into the past. Her mother had been extraordinarily beautiful, but she had married for love to somebody who had no prospects and was poor. And as many of us know, being young and in love, that often is a temporary thing. That is not to say that there aren't people who marry their, you know, childhood sweetheart or high school sweetheart and do continue to have a happy marriage beyond that, because plenty of people manage to like pull off some of that. But for the most part, the loves that you have earlier on in your life, you outgrow them. You change as a person and they don't, or they change in a different direction than you. And in my opinion, a lot of the people that we love in our lives, they're not meant to be forever. They're meant to be a lesson. They're meant to be a portion of your life that you must learn from. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But, yeah, when you are very young, you don't have great judgment. And I think a lot of people underestimate the stress that being poor causes on a relationship. It's like the number one cause of divorce, as far as I remember, financial problems. And Zoya is very aware of what an obligation and a baggage she is to her mother, and tries to make herself as small as possible and as agreeable to her mother as possible to win her love. Now, I never felt like I had to win my mother's love, but I was very aware that I was a strain. And I was very aware that my mom had me when she was super young. Like, as I got older, it became obvious very quickly. I was like 6 years old when I first began to realize my mom is way younger than all the other moms here. And it led to me mothering my mother in a way that is not super healthy. And Zoya has a bit of that energy here as well. And eventually she catches the eye of this dude who is 63 years old. Very rich man. Zoya is literally 9. Okay? It's so gross. This guy should be fucking executed, honestly. And her mother is delighted. Despite the fact that this is her daughter who is an infant, a fucking child. She's happy. And he's sending all kinds of gifts of food and whatnot. And finally, it's like the night before the wedding. And Zoya is freaking out. She is trying so hard to not let it show how much she hates this, because her mother seems happy for like the first time. But she is not doing okay. And her mother's sister Liliana comes to visit, and allegedly it is to attend the wedding. But no, Liliana is like, this is not going to fucking happen. You are not going to allow this. The guy is a predator. I can't believe that you would even consider this. And Sabina basically is like, it's not like he's going to, she says he won't hurt her. But what is being implied here is like, well, he's not just going to rape her. He said he would wait for her to bleed. Am I to applaud him? Liliana had demanded. How will you protect her if he changes his mind? You are selling your own child. And 1, good point. 2, good point. 3, excellent point. I mean, I got my period when I was 9. So, you know, like, are you, no. And the mom responds with, well, we're all bought and sold. At least she'll get a price that will, like, you know, make her life easier than mine will be. Soon she'll be old enough to be a soldier. And then what? We'll live off her meager pay? She'll serve until she's killed or injured so she can go on to live alone and poor like you? And the sister is just basically like, better that than to be beholden to some old man. And to a point, I'm like, I don't know if I agree with that, Liliana. You know, becoming a soldier and risking your life, is that better? I mean, they're both selling yourself in a way. It's just, you know, one of them we consider more respectable than the other. It's just more about her being fucking 9. That's really what I'm preoccupied by. So the next day at the wedding, Liliana comes in and throws a fit and refuses to move. And Valentine drags her off as she's screaming at him. And she spits in his face and he smashes her in the head with his walking stick. I should mention, actually, he smashes her first and then she spits on him. It's not like he's responding to a provocation. He starts the actual physical violence. And he hits her again and her eyes roll back and she just keeps fucking telling him that he's a criminal and he's filth. Honestly, I admire the shit out of the fact that she keeps on just throwing it in his face. He is about to kill her in front of everybody and she's just like, I don't care. I am going to go down telling you who the fuck you are. If that's, you know, whatever, like, oh well. And I wish that I could have that kind of courage. I don't know that I would. I feel like I would shut my mouth after the first smash in the face. And this is when it says, Zoya understood then that her aunt was going to be murdered before the church altar and no one was going to prevent it because Valentine was a rich, respected man, because Liliana Guerin was no one at all. And this is when her rage just comes flying out of her and she literally blows the roof off the church and throws him like against the wall and knocks him down. And Liliana is like, haha, she's Grisha. So now you can't marry her. And this moment is just so like cathartic, you know? And of course, Liliana takes Zoya to school and drops her off there. Zoya is super sad at first that her aunt can't join her at the school, but eventually goes to see her where she lives and continues to just look up to this woman as her mother, really, you know? Somebody who was actually looking out for her and trying to safeguard her childhood and her person. And that is why when the Darkling allows the fold to expand to Novosibirsk and her aunt vanishes and is dead, like it, sometimes this sort of like function, I would be like suspicious and be like, maybe she's still alive. We didn't see a body. She didn't see a body. I don't think so here. I think she's dead. I think if this woman were still alive, she would have been able to track Zoya down by now, and I think she would have. And this dude, as she hears like her aunt is dead, walks by as she's like crying. And this dude walks by and tells her to smile, which is just so amazing. He frames it as, we're still alive, there is still hope, but nevertheless, this bitch is out here curled up crying. Don't walk by and tell her to smile. Are you fucking... And not just smile. It's smile, comma, beautiful girl. I remember when I was like in my early 20s being told to smile more than once by my boss. And I couldn't put my finger on why it made me so angry that he tell me to smile. I didn't have the fucking vocabulary for it yet, you know? And I would just basically respond with, why? Why should I smile? Because you're a joke? I really did not like the guy. And he couldn't fire me because I was the only one who knew how to do my job. But, yeah, I would just get so enraged and I didn't even really get it, why I felt this way. And so Zoya pulling the fucking breath out of this guy's lungs, she like lets him live. She doesn't kill him, but I get it. I mean, I felt that kind of rage on an ordinary day, and Zoya's just experienced like the worst loss of her life, you know? Yeah, no. So this is when she just throws in with Alina, and it mentions that she had never told Alina why she had switched sides. And it didn't really like occur to me to wonder that much about it when I was reading the other books, because frankly, Zoya isn't that big a part of those to a degree, you know? She's around all the time, but it doesn't feel like she's at the forefront consistently enough for me to wonder about that. And the dragon says to her, the wound still bleeds. You will never truly be strong until it closes. I don't want it to heal, Zoya said angrily. I need it. Zoya of the lost city, Zoya of the broken heart, you could be so much more. Why didn't you come? Why didn't you save her? All of them. We didn't know what he intended. You should have tried. Can you forgive us for being foolish, for being frail, for being fallible despite our great powers? Can you forgive yourself? Zoya, open the door. Connect your past to your future. You are the conduit. You will bring the Grisha back to what they were meant to be before time and tragedy corrupted their power, but only if you can open the door. Why me? Because you chose this path. Because your king trusts you. Because you are strong enough to survive the fall. I don't love that. That feels very fucking like ominous to me, you know? I don't like it. I just don't want Zoya to die, man. But I do really want to see what she'd be capable of. I'm very excited about that. So that's the end of that chapter, and that's the end of that section. Ooh, I came back to... Oh, I'm so sorry. Cheryl's been talking, and I didn't even see... I had the book open in front of me. Did you see the video on YouTube where a booktuber created a Tinder dating profile and answered every question as the Darkling? No, that's fun, though. I don't know if Bitches and Money were covering Buffy the Vampire Slayer for a while, and he set up a Tinder profile as Moloch, one of the like demons in one of the shows, and it's pretty funny. He still sees himself as Isaak and is surprised when people notice him. True. He'll wait until she's 12 or 13. Oh, well, that makes it all right then. Yeah, I can't... 63 years old looking at a 9-year-old. No, seriously, he should be killed. I fully mean that. Sorry. That's just all there is to it. Die. I hate him. Ugh. Men are gross. All right. I'm going to wrap up. Thank you guys again so much for listening. And thank you to Joanna very much for commissioning this episode. Hope you are enjoying it. And, Cheryl says ripped apart by Volcra. That's good. I hope he does. He's got to be dead by now, I guess. But if he's not, it would be really fun if Zoya manages to get some sort of revenge at this point. She probably wouldn't show her like growth as a person. Ugh, whatever. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap, but thank you again, and until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.